They lied to you about the real Wolf of Wall Street. He is not this man or even this guy. The real Wolf of Wall Street dates way back in time, specifically during the First World War, where he even played a huge role in it. But what's really weird is, no one is talking about him. 1899. John D. Rockefeller Jr., the only son of the richest man in the world at the time, knew that something big was about to happen. His father's private secretary, George Rogers, had just told him that some mysterious man whispered a strange little secret to him. The secret: James R. Kinney, a titan of Wall Street, had taken a massive stake in US leather company stock. Now, when someone like Kinney puts that much cash on the line, it's certain he knows something that is not accessible by the rest of the crowd. So, he immediately started to buy US leather stocks. He wanted to buy any stocks he could get his hands on. Rockefeller Jr. had much of his father's money, but didn't seem to get much of his respect. This trade would help him gain his father's trust as a businessman and an investor. He was certain that the US leather stock would soar in no time, so he wanted to get his hands on as many stocks as possible for the cheapest price. But traders on the stock market noticed huge buying orders on the ticker, the thing that made them realize that something was coming. So they joined the buying wave, creating a huge demand that caused the stock to overshoot. But suddenly, the stock market went to an all-time low, leaving Rockefeller Jr. and everyone who bought into US leather with dramatic losses. Little did they know that when they were all aggressively buying, someone on the other side was dumping all of his stocks. Later on, Rockefeller knew that Kinney had never held any position in the stock in the first place. But this was not the crazy part. Rockefeller immediately knew he was ripped off when he discovered the little secret. He found out that his father's secretary, George Rogers, was secretly meeting at lunchtime with the Wolf of Wall Street, David Lamar. Rockefeller Jr. went home with embarrassment to his father, while David Lamar went home with a total of $1 million in a single trade, which equals to $17 million in today's money. When you hear the name The Wolf of Wall Street, often DiCaprio and Jordan Belfort are the ones that first come to your mind, thanks to the award-winning movie. But this is a man who, at the peak of his career, represented a vital threat to the national security of the United States in the middle of the First World War. But the real problem is, no one is talking about him. Lamar was born in 1877. The history of his family, where he was born and raised, remains a mystery till this day. But he first appeared in New York in 1890. He was arrested for fraud many times. Every time this guy got out of jail, the newspaper went wild with warnings to keep the public on their toes. He manipulated the stock market on several occasions by spreading fake rumors about the stocks he held a short position in. In several incidents, he was caught selling stocks to small investors in Wall Street, only for them to find out that he didn't own the assumed stocks in the first place, and he was nowhere to be found. Through his side hustle of extracting money out of people's pockets, his money would soon enough add up to buy him a house on 5th Avenue Street. He seemed to make a decent living being a con artist and manipulating the stock market. Years after the Rockefeller incident, the Wolf of Wall Street thought of pulling another elite investor to his list. This time, it was J.P. Morgan. The telephone rang in the office of Mr. Lewis Ledyard, the personal counsel to J.P. Morgan. Ledyard answered the phone.
It's Congressman Mitchell Palmer.
Mitchell Palmer had just won the elections of the House of Representatives. Being a member of the Democratic Party, he offered that he could be a secret middleman between J.P. Morgan and the Democratic administration. Back then, J.P. Morgan had a lot of trouble with the Democrats, and Congressman Palmer offered to strike a secret deal between them to end all of these troubles once and for all. But Ledyard felt that something was wrong. Although the man on the other side of the phone seemed legit, an aspect of this importance should have been discussed in a private face-to-face meeting or even an official letter from his office. His suspicions grew strong, so he decided to report the incident to the officers. Later on, investigations revealed that Congressman Mitchell Palmer never called Ledyard's office in the first place. Ledyard wanted to know who is the man who is bold enough to pull away a move this big. It was no one other than the Wolf of Wall Street. But many people on Wall Street were confused. What exactly will David Lamar gain from impersonating a congressman over the phone? After all, he didn't ask for money or any favors in exchange for what he was offering. Later on, they found out that Lamar was planning to extract a payment of $25,000 from J.P. Morgan, the greatest banker in America, and then blackmail him for the rest of his life, demanding more money. The Wolf of Wall Street was charged with fraud for impersonating a congressman in a telephone talk. He was sentenced to 2 years in prison, but he didn't surrender himself immediately. He kept on the run for months. Most people thought he didn't surrender himself out of fear of prison, which to some extent is true. No one wants to be imprisoned in a federal prison. But David Lamar was working on something else, something much bigger. June 1915, the Labour's National Peace Council was formed. The main goal was to prevent the US from supplying arms in the war. They claimed they wanted the US to stay neutral and promote peace. Massive labor protests were organized nationwide, calling out for neutrality and demanding the government stop funding a war they had nothing to do with. The labor protests and strike actions were targeted towards the manufacturing facilities producing weapons and other equipment for the Allies in Europe. The protests were so big that the US government had to delay many deliveries. These delays damaged the Allies' position in Europe significantly, and the odds of winning had shifted temporarily towards the German Empire. But in December 1915, the whole scheme fell apart. The US investigators found out that the Labour's National Peace Council was originally founded by the German naval intelligence officer Captain Franz von Rentelen. The main goal was to cut the US arms supply to the Allies in the war in an attempt to shift the winning odds towards their side. So they funded labor protests to shut down the ammunition factories and prevent them from supporting the Allies. But what exactly were the tasks handed to David Lamar? After all, he was known for being a conman and a stock market manipulator. Well, the Wolf of Wall Street was their money guy. For the following months, Lamar received money from the Germans with the missions of distributing it to Labor Council members taking part in the strikes. In times of war, this is considered an act of treason, but the Germans only discovered later on that almost all of the money they sent was going straight to Lamar's deep pockets. They even described him in the book Spy Sites of New York City as a man more successful at conning people out of money than managing it. The Wolf of Wall Street was accused of plotting a conspiracy. He managed to flee from the US officials into Canada, but he couldn't settle there for long, so he went straight to Mexico. Chasing him was long and tedious. He had not only one but two sentences. One of them was a conspiracy. After an 8-month-long chase, he was caught in Mexico City. His volume of transactions and the kind of deals he pulled there raised suspicions in many investors' minds. After all, he was relatively new to the city, so they reported him to the officials, and the officers were happy enough to finally find him. After battling in courtrooms for multiple other suits and appeals, he was finally out in August 1924. Learning from what had happened in the past, he kept himself under the radar for quite a while, but he couldn't hold himself for that long. In 1927, he was charged for raising the price of securities through wash sales to his friends on Wall Street, and in 1933, he was arrested and charged with grand larceny. This time, David was caught impersonating a rubber dealer from England and managed to sell members of the Produce Exchange a certain quantity of rubber. Once he closed the deal, he took the money and was never to be seen again. He battled the charging court and was out once again. But in 1934, a hotel manager reported that one of his guests was found dead alone in his room after not being responsive for 2 straight days. The guest was David Lamar. But do you know what is the crazy part? Even the real name of the Wolf of Wall Street was not David Lamar. Upon his death, rumors spread out that David's real name was Isaac Frankenstein. Other rumors claimed his name was Levi, and some thought it was Lewis.